The vast Pacific was not won by great fleet engagements alone. It was a war of supply, a brutal contest over fuel, materials, and men. Japan's entire war machine depended on the smooth, relentless operation of its convoys. Long strings of slow, heavily laden supply ships ferrying oil and iron from the occupied territories back to the home islands. Destroying these convoys was the top priority for the United States Navy. If you cut the Japanese lifeline, you choked the entire empire. But reaching those ships meant navigating the most lethal waters on Earth, patrolled by an enemy determined to make American subs pay for every sunken ton. The greatest danger to every American submariner was not the torpedo, but the Japanese destroyer. These were fast, agile surface ships armed with sensitive Type 93 sonar, a terrifying advantage in the murky depths and carrying massive racks of brutal depth charges. To the men of the U.S. Submarine service, the shallow waters near the Japanese bases were known simply as Depth Charge Alley. Getting caught by a destroyer meant a prolonged, violent ordeal where the crew was trapped, waiting for the hull to eventually give way to the pounding shock waves. Survival was a matter of luck, not skill. In the early years of the war, the challenge was compounded by a crippling secret known only to the submariners themselves. Their own weapons were failing. American Mark 14 torpedoes were infamously unreliable. They ran too deep, their magnetic detonators failed, and often they simply hit the target and failed to explode. Morale was crushed by the injustice. Subs would spend days tracking a convoy, line up the perfect high-risk shot, and watch their torpedoes harmlessly bounce off the enemy's hull. The U.S. Silent service was being defeated not just by the Japanese, but by its own faulty ordnance. The machine tasked with overcoming this deadly combination of Japanese defense and American equipment failure was the USS Harder, a Gato-class submarine. She was a silent, powerful predator, capable of diving deep and moving quietly. But against the massive, fast destroyers, she was inherently vulnerable. A large, thin-skinned steel tube with no armor, relying solely on stealth to survive. Yet, the Harder was destined to be different. She was piloted by a unique philosophy that rejected caution and embraced the unthinkable. The man who defined the Harder was its commander, Commander Samuel Dealey. Dealey was not a cautious hunter. He was an aggressive, front-line brawler who had watched too many reliable torpedo shots fail from a safe distance. He viewed the submarine not as a sneaky, distant sniper, but as a deadly, fast-moving ambush predator. He believed the best defense was a sudden, overwhelming offense. His radical, career-risking motto was simple and direct: attack the escort first. Dealey understood that if you eliminated the most dangerous enemy, the rest of the targets were helpless. It was a doctrine of sheer audacity that would redefine submarine warfare. The Harder's patrol began in one of the most dangerous and heavily guarded areas of the Pacific, Tawi-Tawi. This was a major forward staging area for the Imperial Japanese Navy, filled with high-value targets, but also bristling with patrols, sonar gear, and relentless destroyer activity. Dealey's mission was simply to patrol and harass, but his intention was far more aggressive. The captain and crew knew this was not a simple hunting trip. They were deliberately placing the submarine inside the enemy's own defensive perimeter. Every sonar ping, every shadow, and every surface ship represented an immediate, deadly threat. The tension in the close confines of the submarine was absolute. The Harder made contact almost immediately. It wasn't a small, defenseless coastal convoy. The sonar screens lit up with a huge formation of large supply ships, high-value targets, but they were heavily escorted by Japanese destroyers, the absolute worst kind of prey. This was a textbook, layered, Anti-submarine defense. Dealey spent hours maneuvering the Harder, calculating the precise course and speed of the escorting destroyers. He could have fired from a safe distance, but he knew the unreliable American torpedoes needed to be fired point-blank to ensure the warheads armed and detonated reliably. The risk was monumental, but the potential payoff was a guaranteed kill. Dealey made his radical choice. He dismissed the standard safety doctrine, which mandated fleeing the area immediately after firing. Instead, he chose to execute his infamous motto, "Attack the escort first." The logic was brutal. Eliminate the guard dogs, and the herd is helpless. He brought the Harder in dangerously close to the lead destroyer, the one best equipped with sonar and depth charges. The crew prepared for the unthinkable, firing their deadly ordnance not at a supply ship, but at their direct, primary threat. This was a strategic choice that immediately put the sub's survival on the line. 96-hour clock started here. Dealey made his approach, firing a perfect spread of torpedoes from incredibly close range. The blast was deafening, even from inside the submarine. The lead Japanese destroyer struck precisely on its hull, broke apart, and rapidly sank. The immediate chaos was overwhelming. The element of surprise was completely gone, replaced by the terrifying, deafening reality of war. The sinking ship's crew and the surrounding patrol boats immediately knew the hunter was close by. The reaction was instant and terrifying. The remaining Japanese destroyers instantly dropped their hunting patterns and swarmed the area where their comrade had just sunk. The hydrophones in the control room were filled with the sound of enemy propellers closing in. The depth charges began to rain down. The first explosion was a massive shock that violently rattled the Harder's hull. The lights flickered and failed briefly as the electrical system absorbed the blow. The hull plates groaned and popped under the pressure, the air filled with the smell of ozone and the metallic tang of fear. The Harder was trapped under its target's own patrol area, with nowhere left to run. This brutal, terrifying action ended the first day of the impossible 4-day fury. Dealey's decision to attack the destroyer had been a setup. Instead of fleeing the area, he did the unthinkable. He used the chaos caused by the sinking ship to hide inside the enemy's own formation. The remaining destroyers were frantically searching the area, but their sonar was confounded by the wreckage and oil slicks. The Harder crept silently into the thermal layer, a natural ocean phenomenon where temperature changes deflect sound waves effectively, hiding the sub from the Japanese sonar. The crew endured hours of stifling heat and silence, listening to the enemy propellers overhead. The tension was broken by another sighting. Day 2 had dawned, and the Harder spotted a new Japanese destroyer actively patrolling the area, searching for them. Standard doctrine demanded waiting for night or deeper water. Dealey chose to attack. The Harder performed a rapid, aggressive dive. Dealey maneuvered the submarine directly into the destroyer's path, cutting the distance to zero. He lined up his shot and fired torpedoes at the searcher from point-blank range. The proximity ensured a reliable detonation, and the second destroyer sank instantly. The violent sinking of the second destroyer brought a third, even more determined escort straight to the scene. Dealey didn't flee. He recognized the destroyer's attack run by the increasing tempo of its propeller beats. This was the moment of truth. Dealey waited until the last possible second, when the destroyer was almost directly overhead and beginning to drop its charges. He fired the torpedoes on a shallow angle, creating a perfect down-the-throat shot aimed right up the destroyer's forward path. The resulting explosion sank the third escort before its depth charges even had a chance to detonate. With 3 highly trained anti-submarine destroyers gone in less than 48 hours, the big supply vessels were defenseless. Dealey surfaced the Harder to survey the carnage and prepare his final attack. The Harder quickly closed in on the now exposed logistics ships. Dealey sank 2 large supply vessels in rapid succession using his remaining forward torpedoes, dramatically crippling the enemy's logistics capacity. The total score was now 5 ships, sunk in a display of relentless, suicidal aggression. The Harder was now an empty shell, down to only 2 torpedoes in the aft tubes. The entire Japanese Navy was actively hunting them, now aware they were facing an unprecedented threat. The crew had been active for nearly 72 hours under constant threat, completely exhausted but alive. The sheer audacity of the attack was unprecedented. No submarine commander had ever dared to sink 3 destroyers while they were actively escorting a convoy. The Harder's survival against the odds became a legend unfolding in real time. Dealey had only 2 torpedoes left and faced a swarm of vengeful patrol boats. He used his remaining ordnance brilliantly, firing them wide to scatter the patrol craft and force them into evasive maneuvers. This created a crucial, momentary gap in the perimeter. The Harder, battered and exhausted, silently slipped out of the Tawi-Tawi area after 96 hours of relentless action. The sheer relief felt by the crew having escaped the depth charge alley they had just dominated was immense. They had survived the impossible. The official reaction of the Japanese Navy was one of total panic. The loss of 3 destroyers and 2 supply ships in a single, heavily guarded area in 4 days was unprecedented and inexplicable. They concluded that a single submarine could not have achieved this. They mistakenly believed an entire wolf pack, a coordinated group of U.S. subs, was operating in the area. This miscalculation forced them to divert massive resources to counter a threat that was simply 1 brilliant captain and 1 brave crew. When Dealey and the Harder returned to base, they revolutionized submarine warfare. The tactic of attacking the escort first was swiftly adopted fleet-wide. Dealey proved that the most dangerous weapon in the Pacific wasn't the torpedo. It was the aggressive, thinking commander. The Harder was unofficially and forever renamed the Destroyer Killer, because its primary targets were the most formidable escorts, not the easier, slow-moving cargo ships. The success of the Harder's 96-hour patrol marked a crucial turning point. It demonstrated that aggressive tactics and superior morale could decisively overcome the enemy's technological defenses. This new, bold American strategy quickly led to the complete collapse of the Japanese supply lines later in the war. Dealey taught the entire silent service to be predators, not just lurkers. The Harder would go on to sink the most tonnage per patrol of any Allied submarine, forever cementing its status as a legend. The legacy of Commander Sam Dealey is one of pure, audacious courage. He was later awarded the Medal of Honor, but his true legacy was the philosophy he embedded in the submarine service. His suicidal approach, the willingness to risk everything to kill the most dangerous target, first became the enduring spirit of the U.S. submarine service. The Harder proved that impossibility was simply a challenge waiting to be solved by courage and calculation.